Roberto De Zerbi has landed with a shitload of excess baggage. Gary of Harlow says he's the third highest paid manager in the league, which is a hell of a commitment for a club that charges 15 quid for a pie and still ends up with a debt the size of a small nation. De Zerbi has signed for 5 years, which in De Zerbi years is 6 months. But if he keeps us up, do we care if he flounces out because the club canteen can't make a decent espresso? But should we be worried that the man brought in to save us has a habit of not winning a game for the first 2 months of a new job? Mikey Moore, he's been in the news, hasn't he, Julie? He wants to come back to Spurs, but will the genii at the top flog him for a tenner and a haggis? Kev will address the Americanisation of football. How long before matches are split into quarters with the national anthem massacred by some wannabe Beyoncé? That and more belongs in Room 101, and we'll ask, was it right for everyone on the Nice One Cyril WhatsApp group to hope the entire West Ham squad would suffer season-ending injuries against Leeds? We'll talk about Sunderland and so much else. Strap in. It's Nice One Cyril.
Nice one, Cyril.
So, welcome to Nice One Cyril. I am one-time moderately mediocre stand-up comedian and impressionist Simon Lipson. On the pod today, legendary journalist Julie Welch, who's covered everything from the glory days to the why the fuck am I still here days. Kev Acott, who exists in a permanent state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously convinced we'll be relegated this season and win the Premier League next. And Lee Brown, an immensely talented actor and voice artist who's currently available for literally anything. Welcome, one and all. All right, so let's talk about the man himself, De Zerbi. He's here, apparently the third highest paid manager in the Premier League, although the only substantiation for that is various tweets by various Garys of Harlow. 5-year commitment. Julie, how long before he flounces out?
I'm actually giving it about 5 months, but I may be over-optimistic. I don't know. I was trying to trace the course of Conte's flounce. It really only happened in his second season with us, didn't it? So
Yeah.
I think De Zerbi is probably quite competitive and want to flounce earlier. I don't know. I've found this fantastic item from a newsletter I get, very amusing, called The Upshot, which was about a brawl that took place in the dressing room when De Zerbi was manager at Marseille. It was so violent that one of the players watching was actually sick. And I just wondered, who's going to take part in the first brawl?
That's a key question. I mean, you can imagine this kind of thing happening, Kev. I mean, he's an incendiary kind of character, combustible, and you wonder whether that will be conveyed to a squad that I sense has been rather supine recently under the hopeless Frank and the pointless Igor Tudor. Did you see that as a likely outcome at some point?
Yeah, I suspect so. I mean, just watching the video of the training session from a few days ago, I was a bit frightened watching it. I thought at some point he's going to turn around and look at me and demand something of me that I couldn't do. But I was impressed. I was impressed by that intensity. I mean, there's been these two arguments, isn't there? One is they need the Harry Redknapp sort of arm around the shoulder. We need to be nice to them. They're a bit fragile. And then I think there's a lot of us thinking, no, they're not that fragile. They just need sort of pointing in the right direction, and they need to feel a bit of that terror. So just seeing that shifted my view of him a bit. I think I'm with Julie, I think 5 to 6 months probably. Of course, some of that's about whether we go down or not and how much pressure the board are put under by people like us. How disillusioned fans are if he lost all 7 or something, and we went down. We wouldn't want him to continue, would we? No. So, but someone on Twitter said he's been given the power of Conte and Mourinho put together. No Spurs manager has ever had that kind of power. I don't know where they got that from, and I don't know quite what that means. But actually, I sort of hope there's some truth in it. I hope there's this thing about is he a coach or is he a manager? We want him to be managing. We want him to have control, I think. And I think the first signs were good. I think he's going to do his best with, not very good tools, but who knows?
I do love an unattributed quote like that. This is what's happening, according to me, on Twitter. And I've got a few of those for you later. Lee, we all saw that training video, of course. It did seem very intense. He seemed to be right in the thick of it, pushing and shoving people. He got right up in Solanke's face, and it did look highly energetic. It looked committed. This is the big bubble that could easily burst after 5 minutes at, I was going to say Roker Park, but you know what I mean, Stadium of Light on the weekend.
I'm just loving the imagery that you guys are coming out with, especially Kev just now. I'm expecting Skeletor to turn up and De Zerbi to come out with a big sword. By the power of Grayskull, he's going to get us going. I'm choosing cognitive dissonance, really. I know that a lot of us probably are thinking that, logic tells us that this should be a disaster, but I'm hoping against hope, actually, this might just be the right move. I didn't want him to begin with, and I didn't think he would be the right person for us. As you know, I put all my eggs in the Poch basket, but now I see what potentially, the upside of this for what he is as a young manager. He's still only 45, someone who's very dynamic, and I think this team needs that. Somebody with a very clear vision and philosophy of how to play, and I think this team needs that. That's what I think they bought him with Ange, and I think in a different way he's much more nous. But I think that this could be the catalyst for them transforming and understanding the type of players that this is his words as well, the type of player they are and what the stakes are. And I think he will communicate those stakes quite well. So naively, I'm quite hopeful that we'll sort of pull clear of this now.
Let me put this to you, Julie. I'm questioning your journalistic integrity here, because on last week's pod you said that De Zerbi's got good hair, and I saw a shot of him this week with a very distinctive bald patch at the back. Now, granted, you may not have seen that.
Has he got a tonsure? An incipient tonsure?
You won't hear tonsure on many podcasts, will you? Come on. And you won't hear Marseille said with such elan and flair, as you heard earlier from Julie. Here's the question. I will eventually get there. These are his stats, Julie. Okay. He failed to win any of his first 5 Premier League games with Brighton. Took over at Benevento, if I may have mispronounced that. That was in 2017. They played lovely football, but were relegated from Italy's top flight. He failed to win any of his first 9 games in charge of Benevento. And when he took over Palermo mid-season 2016, he won just 1 of 13 games before being sacked. It doesn't augur well, but then let's remember, we took Tudor on because supposedly he was the big rescue man. He was going to drag us out. And he failed very slightly. Are we just going out of the frying pan into the fire?
Well, all I can say is that Spurs as a club are famous for their first club to win the double, first club to win in Europe, da-da-da-da-da-da. So from De Zerbi's point of view, I think, this is the first club where he manages to string together 7 wins in what's the rest of the season. Is it 7? It's been a long day.
Yes.
Yeah.
7 to go.
Yeah, I always have to worry about senility setting in at this time of night. I'm not very good on numbers by this time, even though I drink lots of coffee. I feel optimistic. There was a lovely bit in the training video, and the camera returned to it twice, him putting his arm around Berreval. It was a very, very comforting gesture, and I kept thinking, what's wrong with Berreval? Is he miserable? Is he homesick? Does he want to go to Liverpool? Something like that. So I don't know, but it looked nice, So he might be an arm round the shoulder guy, as well as being, the Poundland Conte. Who knows?
Interesting this, isn't it? The fact that we had the kind of lunatic optimism of Ange and, 9 men attacking. Then we swap that in, having won a trophy, by the way, for the exceedingly cautious, useless shithouse, let's worry about them approach of Thomas Frank. Let's not forget Igor, whose approach was completely baffling. No one's got a clue what he was doing stylistically. And now we've got someone, well, we know he likes to play from the back. He likes quick football, beat the press, all that kind of malarkey. More like Ange, perhaps a bit more like Conte, a bit more, I suppose, interested in working it all out on the training pitch. It screams lack of focus and understanding by the hierarchy. They haven't got a fucking clue what it is they're trying to achieve.
They haven't. Obviously, right now, they want us to stay up. There was probably some calculation that said we need to think about saving ourselves from relegation, and we need someone who, if that happens, can take us into a new era and sort of build on that. And it's funny, isn't it, how changeable we can be. That, I think it was just watching that video, and I thought, if he can keep us up, then maybe this has been a good decision. I suspect it was an accidental or largely accidental good decision. They don't know. They absolutely don't know what they're doing. And there's desperation in bringing him in. But it could work if he keeps us up. If he doesn't, then if I was him, I wouldn't stay, whatever contract I'd, signed. But who knows? I don't know. So I keep ending everything with, I don't know, because I just don't.
I did allude to this in my introduction, so you're on message. Let's have a chat about this 5-year thing, right? So we brought in an interim. Somebody on this podcast said very intelligently and with great insight that bringing an interim in meant that the players didn't have to buy into anything. There was no need, because how seriously you can take a bloke who's not going to be there in 5 minutes' time. That was me. Sorry, I wouldn't have been quite so braggadly in normal circumstances, but I did say that. The idea that, you would have somebody just popping in. The players, these are supposedly top players. They're not going to buy that league. So I can see the sense of this 5-year contract, even if we all know it'll last probably into the summer and no further. It says to the players, look, here's a commitment.
They paid well over the odds, and he's had them over a barrel over things. Maybe the 5-year contract's partly his suggestion. Who knows? But it is a statement of intent, and I think that that's what we all needed. We needed to have an idea of where we're headed and what type of football we want to play. And I think, for the interim idea wasn't the stupidest of ideas, because we thought that by the summer we'd have our pick of managers, perhaps. It just hasn't gone how we expect to. But I do think, as you've alluded to, that we might have lucked ourselves into a good manager. And many people have talked about him as being this visionary character who seems to learn every single job. And we've heard of players coming out subsequently, because I think we all talked about, didn't we, in the chat that we have, that we thought this could be a disaster because he's such a volcanic character. But actually, when you do listen to players that have played for him, yes, that he has this kind of like Latin temperament, which is very fiery, but most of them find that inspirational. But equally, he does have this kind of fatherly, like this is one of the words that have been used several times, that he was like a father figure to them. And I do think, again, that our lot need that. They need a bit of that arm around the shoulder of you, as you said earlier, Simon. So 5 years, he may or may not last it. Who knows? Again, I'd love to be optimistic and think he will. History shows us none of our managers, apart from Pochettino perhaps, has lasted anywhere near the cycle of their contract. But maybe they've stumbled across a good one here, and we just got to hope, haven't we? That's all we have.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, going back, Julie, to that training video, which has kind of inspired us all to believe that the players are buying in and there's double energy and it's all very exciting. one of the things to emerge from that was the rondo. Now, look, we talk about things like high presses, low presses, high blocks, low blocks, double pivots, and we haven't got a fucking clue what we're talking about. Let's be honest. And so rondo came up on our WhatsApp group this week, and then I thought, "Shit, how can Julie not know what a rondo is?" And then I went and Googled it. So, what is a rondo?
Well, I did my homework and I did actually Google it. And it said a rondo is a football training exercise where a group of players in possession attempt to keep the ball away from fewer defenders in a confined area, which sounds a bit like Piggy in the Middle, doesn't it? It emphasizes slick passing, high intensity movement, technical provision, spatial awareness, invented by Johann Cruyff, and is a staple for teaching possession, which our team do need to learn a bit about. Whether it's going to be effective over the next 7 matches, I don't know.
Kev, now, we do need to address the issue that, it's the kind of the elephant in the room. We talked a bit last week about the Greenwood business, where it seemed that De Zerbi was perhaps not an apologist for the behaviour, but he kind of swept it a bit under the carpet. What a lovely bloke Greenwood is. And that clearly caused consternation amongst certain fan groups, I think quite rightly. And, there's this kind of deal with the devil we've made with somebody, I don't know, his morality or his views don't accord with the majority of people. He said this week, "I've never wanted to downplay the issue of violence against women or violence against anyone more broadly. In my life, I've always stood up for those who are more vulnerable and more fragile. I've consistently fought and taken a stand to be on the side of those who are most at risk. Those who know me well will know I'm not the kind of person who makes compromises to win more games or to win an extra title. I'm sorry if I offended anyone's feelings with this subject matter. I have a daughter and I'm very sensitive to these things, blah, blah, blah." Now, a couple of things that I wanted to raise here. One is, it's not really an apology when all you're saying is, "I'm sorry if you were upset about this." And also, he did make compromises to try and win a title because he signed Greenwood. So, I don't know, this doesn't just go away, does it?
My suspicion is it will go away. I think there will be some passionate voices who will continue to bring it up. But unfortunately, football fans are hypocrites, including me. If he does a good job, I'll push it away. I mean, he has a daughter. I have 2 daughters, and one of them feels very strongly about this whole issue. It makes me uncomfortable. There's also, I'm using the word properly here, generational. There's a generational issue, which is people are much more sensitive to language and much more sensitive to the attitudes that celebrities, people in the public eye come out with than maybe us old people are used to. I don't know what the opinions of the majority of Spurs players or past managers are. I'm sure there's some really dodgy opinions. There's always been a pretty homophobic, misogynistic and racist sort of culture until very recently. I don't feel that we can start making those judgments with everyone. In this case, he came out with stuff that probably 100 other people also would agree with, but haven't said, so we don't know. And I realise I just talked myself round in circles here, because actually even my daughter, who feels strongly about this, doesn't feel so strongly that she doesn't want to hope that he's successful for our sake, not for his sake. I think that the line for me and the line for a lot of people would be, if we were talking about signing Mason Greenwood, then that would be very, very different. Why is it different? Because he has been supportive, and he still had, supportive of Greenwood, and he still hasn't really flagged him off. And I just wrote that down when you were talking about what he said, that he's against violence against women and violence against anyone. And I just thought, why have you said that bit? Why have you added in the violence against anyone? Because what that's saying is, you're being generic about this, and you're not acknowledging that the issue is about violence against women. You're against violence generally. But it's sort of betrayed to me, you haven't really got it. Yeah. I suspect, Poch might have been the same Conte, Mourinho, Nuno, who knows?
Yeah, I mean that's a very perceptive point. Actually, that it's generalising when he needed to be specific. I mean, there was a tweet this week, and this was one of many, which said, "Bring Greenwood to the lane, gaffer. He walks into our team and becomes our best player. Fact, capital letters, fact." Look, it is troubling. There's been all this business with alleged abusers. So there was, Thomas Partey. Well, we're all having a go at Thomas Partey playing for Arsenal. Bissouma seemed to come up in some investigation, and we kind of defended him. I think we end up being tribal, don't we, Lee? And so here we are in a team in dire straits. We're bringing in somebody who, in the end, we're paying a lot of money. We love this club. It's been everything to us all our lives. And first things first, let's fucking well stay up, and we don't care who does it.
I think we have to frame it in the context of what we're trying to teach our children at the moment as well, about the manosphere and all this kind of stuff, which is very sort of a hot topic at the moment, quite rightly, because there's a worrying culture of misogyny that's becoming much, much more prevalent these days, and it feels much more acceptable to be misogynist. When you try to look at this in a kind of way that's evaluative, the other thing you have to figure into this is that we don't have Mason Greenwood in our team. He personally hasn't done any of these things. He's just not really dealt with the situation very well, which he wouldn't be the first person or first manager not to really deal with the situation very well, and found himself in hot water over it. And these things do tend to kind of follow you around a bit. But I do think that once he's, and he will be asked again, once he's dealt with it again, I think, like Kev was saying, eventually it will disappear. But I don't think, that the topic around everyday life, let alone football, that it cannot disappear. We need to make sure that, we all start to sort of understand how inappropriate this is and why, even though he may not have meant it in this way, it just adds to a pretty toxic situation.
Very good points. Julie, you were the first female journalist to report on football, famously, and you have told us in the past of some of the misogyny that you had to deal with, and I'm sure you still do. It's a very macho environment, isn't it, football? And the fact that no players have come out as gay, when clearly there must be a percentage of players who are, it reflects badly on the culture, which is, well, not just, I think fellow players actually would be far more forgiving, but it's the fans, isn't it? You go to a match and I still hear people shouting, abuse that takes you back to the 70s and the 60s. It's not something that, Kev's probably right. It probably will go away if he saves us from relegation, or at least it will go into the back burner or onto the back burner. But it's still a bit troubling, isn't it?
First of all, let me say it is really great to hear three men talking about this issue in the way that you have done. It's kind of an eye-opener for me because, of course, when I started reporting in the 70s, it was a very macho culture, and I did have to fight to be heard, and I never wanted to rock the boat. I think that I've also become desensitized to the issue because of my working life in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, to the extent that I'm much more, I can't see what all the fuss is about than you are, because you are mostly, well, yes, that much younger than me, and also didn't sort of go through the experiences I did. So really, when I look back on what I went through, which of course was nothing like, I never suffered any violence. I suffered quite a bit of misogyny. I also suffered a lot of, didn't suffer. I also experienced a lot of kindness and friendship. So, I had two different views of male attitudes there. And fortunately, the female journalists who followed me have, they've come gradually into a much easier and more open environment for women journalists in football. But what I also will say is that what attracted me to football in the first place was the macho culture. And I think a lot of men like the macho culture. It is interesting that would be very difficult for a Premier League player to come out as gay. And I mean, again, that's something that only men can sort of sort out for themselves. Because, as a woman, it wouldn't worry me at all if my favourite player was gay. But I don't know how men would feel about it because of, what masculinity means.
It's instructive, isn't it, Kev, that there are lots of gay players in the women's game, and they're happily out and proud, and it's not an issue.
I do want to add that I think you're absolutely right to point out that it feels like misogyny is on the increase again, and that's a different context to how this conversation would have been 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It feels as well that actually homophobia and racism are on the rise again, not in the same way, and I don't think we're jumping back to the 70s, but it feels like we're regressing as a culture. The fact that we're having this discussion, and the fact that it has raised so much discussion really across the board amongst not just Spurs fans but other football fans, I think is a sign that things are still positive in a way, that things are still way beyond where they were in the 70s and 80s. But it's also important that we be very careful, I think, and that we, I'm talking to myself here because I don't feel clear about this one at all. I'm not really sure where I stand completely. I'm uncomfortable about him coming to us, but like I said, I'm a hypocrite. I want him to be a successful manager, and I want to ignore, his at best clumsiness about this whole thing. I just want to focus on the football.
Yeah, I mean, okay, and I think in the end, we're now going to, just worry about these 7 games and see what happens. And I suppose, but that, for me, it doesn't go away. It's still going to be lingering in the background, and it's a nasty smell for me, and I'm not crazy about it. Now, let's move on to other matters. Now, I would normally come to Julie with this, but I'm going to come to you, Lee. Mikey Moore. Now, there was an interview in The Athletic, and there was a little film. I think it was a Spurs-made film about his life as a loanee at Rangers. I don't know if you've watched these or read the article. He seems like quite a mature and thoughtful chap. And I think also what's clear is he definitely wants to come back to Spurs to show what he can do at Spurs and in the Premier League. I think that's encouraging because he's clearly a very special player. The other issue that came up with this was the fact that we know he missed a lot of games last season, and it turns out he had myocarditis. I probably pronounced that badly. Why the fuck didn't the club tell us that he had this illness? And it left it to the social media vacuum to invent all kinds of idiotic stories.
Why the club didn't tell us? I mean, that's as clear as day, isn't it? Communication has been bloody awful at our club, and it has let a lot of rumours including the one that I mentioned in our WhatsApp chat, which beggars belief. But as Gary from Harlow once said, that obviously he was off with the clap. He'd had something like that, which was and these sort of things were allowed to then perpetuate and proliferate because the club don't tell us. I mean, why they tell us now? Why couldn't they tell us then? We would have had, a lot of sympathy. I mean, I've had several heart operations myself, actually, so I would have very much been empathetic over what he's going through, because when you have a issue with your heart, you feel exhausted. You just do not feel right in yourself at all. So I can understand why, he was out for a long time needing that R&R. I just hope and pray that it doesn't return, and that we see the player we know he can be return to Spurs.
Absolutely, Julie. We've Mikey Moore, what a player, by the way. He's done very well at Rangers, hasn't he? I watched a bit of Oxford United at the weekend, and Lancashire and Donley on loan there looked absolutely pathetic, to be honest. And I was going to give them an absolute hammering in this podcast, but I think Lancashire scored quite a good goal today. I'll leave it be. But I think the point is they don't look like the future. We've still got more coming back. We've got Williams Barnett. We've got Byfield. These are good-looking potential, stars. Do you see them being used at all? Oh, not more because he's not here. But can you see De Zerbi using them this season, or do you think it's give them a shot next season, or do you think they're going to do what they usually do, which is shove them out on loan and shove them under the carpet and just buy some useless, expensive players?
In an ideal world, I would love to see Williams Barnett, just be retained. Dare I say, name an Arsenal player, as Max Dowman has made such a splash on the other side of North London. If Luca Williams Barnett could be given his chance, then at least we'd get a chance to see whether he had it in him. Byfield, of course, he's already made one appearance and wasn't a disaster. We'd like to see more of him. My question would be, are we getting the cream of the young players yet? Or young players, they're like livestock these days, and they go to the highest bidder, basically. The under-21, the under-18 teams that I've seen over the last few seasons have looked absolutely fantastic. I do still think that Lancashire might be worth a chance. Not so sure about Jamie Donnelly, although he was very good in the academy side. Harry Kane had a terrible time on loan. I wonder what happened to him. We never heard of him again, did we? So you just never know. I'm so looking forward to Mikey Moore actually coming back and playing for us. And I think he will be an absolute gem. I think he will be marvellous. And in his case, I think it was a good idea to loan him out to Rangers, because it was a tough experience that matured him, not only on the pitch, but just being up there away from, his familiar home and things like that. I couldn't think of a better season for him, particularly after his illness. So that worked out well.
It's certainly going to be, I think, be the making of him. And as I say, watching him on that little video, he does come across as very together, very organised and mature. Now, Kev, Spurs published some financial results up to June 2025. Total revenue and other income up 7%, but the club recorded a loss of 94.7 million. That's up 26 million. The club debt is up to 831 million. 158 million pounds net spend and a worrying lack of cash reserves. Now, this doesn't kind of fill me with great excitement, talking numbers, but there is a suggestion here that perhaps the club isn't run quite as brilliantly as we perceived. And, where's that 100 million gone? Do you remember that? The fabled 100 million that was going to be pumped into something or other. Was it just pumped into shore up the club's finances?
I sort of read the stuff about our finances and didn't understand it and just got annoyed because I didn't understand it and moved on, really. I think there's been a lot of smoke and mirrors stuff, and I think Levy in particular was good at that. This is a beautifully run business. It's just that the football's not quite as good as we'd like it to be. You suspect that things haven't been managed financially particularly well. And there's a horrible sort of thought that if only we just hadn't bothered about the rules like Chelsea or Man City, maybe we'd be in a much better position. But do we want to be in a position as a result of that kind of corruption?
Let's move on a little bit here. Kev, you sent a very kind of intriguing message on WhatsApp about people you really like and calculating when it's okay to send them mocking messages. Now, I've read that many times today. I still don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So elucidate.
I had this sort of informal arrangement with a friend of mine who's a Chelsea fan. His whole family's Tottenham, grew up in Enfield. For whatever weird reason, he became a Chelsea fan. And we've always mocked each other. We've sort of left it till the next day after, one or other of us has suffered a humiliating defeat. And that's sort of generally, I've sort of gone with that it's not right to really mock an Arsenal or Chelsea fan immediately. With Arsenal's match on Saturday, it was such a wonderful moment that another friend of mine, I did send her a mocking message about the quadruple and blah, blah, blah. And I could tell by her slightly defensive response that she was a little bit miffed with me. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you'd gone early.
I had definitely gone early, and I thought, and I actually felt guilty. I mean, she's an Arsenal fan, and yet I still felt guilty. I mean, one of the things I've discovered as I've got older, I think, is that some of them can be quite human, and maybe I need to take that on board a bit more. Yeah. So, and then I thought, is it just me that worries about these things? You know, does everyone else just take the piss out of their friends immediately? Am I being too nice? Do I need to change?
I remember when Spurs lost, I think 5-1 to Chelsea at Wembley. Was it an FA Cup semi or something like that? And a mate of mine, Ivor Badil, sent me a text straight after the final whistle, absolutely taking the piss out of me, which I thought was a bit rich, given that he's never, ever sent me a text. And I've known him for 30 years. He's never, ever mocked. And I'm thinking, why on this occasion did he think it appropriate? Just to be honest with you, I've never spoken to him since. So, you know, I think I did the right thing. Look, we've got some stupid tweets we need to get through. Here's one. It is very, very definitive. Tottenham will buy a defender, no matter what the outcome for the end of the season is. So now you know we're going to buy a defender. De Zerbi's remit is simple. Keep Spurs up, get them playing an attacking possession-based style of football, get back into Europe, Champions League preferably, a cup final as a bonus. I mean, this is easy, straightforward, Julie. It's all he's got to do. It's simple.
Who are these people? Do they actually get engagement with crap like that? Or are they 12 years old and you know, in their bedroom and you know, that's kind of the age mentality that I'd sort of think of. It makes you worry for the future of humanity, actually. It really does. You know, is this what we've come to?
Well, speaking of idiotic tweets, here's one for you. Kevin, you alluded to this a bit earlier. Before agreeing to take over at Tottenham Hotspur, Roberto De Zerbi held a major meeting with the London club's ownership. During that, he discussed potential transfer targets and his general long-term vision for the club. He put forward Manuel Locatelli's name as someone who can help him improve the Spurs side, especially if they survive relegation. I mean, this is somebody clearly who's in that meeting, because this is a very detailed retelling.
Yeah, and there are so many of these detailed retellings on there that, you know, people with absolute confidence say stuff. And every time I read one of those tweets, I sort of think, I think I'm going to start doing this. I think I'm going to actually just start planting either the very obvious news story or a completely mad news story and just see what happens to it. It is a bit depressing. It does say something about where we are, I think, where we are generally as human beings. But yeah, it's just, oh God, I don't know. I keep meaning to come off Twitter and, you know, I won't. So I don't know why I said that.
You're hanging in, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just in case there's a nugget.
Yeah.
Where else would we go to learn that Mikey Moore had the clap? I'll just leave
That's
that as
exactly that. So it has its value. All right, I'll tell you what, let's have a little look at room 101. Who are we consigning to the dustbin of history, Lee?
Well, I've gone this week with Alison Rudd because her historical assassination of previous Tottenham managers and Tottenham as a club. She's been less than generous over the years, and I've just got a few on her rap sheet here. One of her headlines was, "Ange is a cult leader." The latest one is obviously, "De Zerbi won't work." Tudor is an arsonist to put out a fire. And Pochettino is a bottler. And then another one, Pochettino only had himself to blame over transfers. Now, if this isn't an agenda, tell me what is.
Listen, great stuff. Mind you, that is very funny about Tudor, the arsonist coming to put out a fire. Very funny. Julie, now look, of course, you know Alison Rudd, so you would not wish to comment thereon. What's your room 101 this week?
I'm a bit frightened that Kevin and I might have, you know, something similar in mind, but mine is the word fan base. because it's an Americanism. And if there's one nation which always uses 2 or 3 syllables when one will do, it's the USA. Because fan base, it's fans or supporters. That's the British way. And, football is our game. And fan base, I mean, it's a way of taking up more air, using up more space, talking longer. Fan base. There is another Americanism which I really dislike, which is winning it, which we haven't had yet. But just wait, because it's going to come through. My least favorite Americanism is clutch. I think we've discussed this before. What the hell do they mean by clutch?
When I come to edit this show, Julie, I'm going to have Land of Hope and Glory playing behind that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just
Because
so that we...
the only thing that you clutch is your pearls. That's what I was going to say before you interrupted me, Simon.
What about
Well, I had to get that vital point in. Kev, what have you got?
It just it does connect with what Julie just said. And I think it's a bit of a big subject. So I'll just say a couple of things about it. It is the corporatization of football. And for me, that links to this obsession with tactics and strategy and, XG and blah, 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 and all that stuff. I wrote something down. Another thing that I realize I don't know what it is. Through the lines. He likes playing through the lines. I don't know. I don't know what that means, but apparently De Zerbi likes his players to play through the lines. And I just thought, what is it that annoys me about that? And it's partly because I don't understand it. So it makes me feel a bit stupid. But more than that, it's part of this new language. I think a lot of the linguistic stuff comes from America, and a lot of the corporatization of football does come from America. But I think there are people over here very, very eager to swallow all of that and to go with... I think the obsession with tactics and strategy is a way of sort of removing the soul, in a way, of football. And being honest, it is partly because I don't understand it. That's definitely part of it. But more than that, my memory, my life as a Tottenham fan has not been about whether we've been playing 4-3-3 or 4-3-2-1 or whatever. The only thing I've ever known really about strategy and tactics is my dad saying football was better when we played 2-3-5. And I've always hoped that one day, just for my dad's sake, we would go back to 2-3-5 sort of formations. But the thing is, I don't care. I genuinely don't care about it. I want us to win. All the glorious stuff about football is not this corporate nonsense. It's not half the stuff that we talk about, really. It's not half the stuff that's on Twitter. It's, it's those moments of sort of magic. It fits with all sorts of other changes in society as well. The takeover of football by people who don't love football. That's happened at Tottenham very clearly, but it's happened across the board as well. So, yes, so stop it, everyone, and do what I want, please.
Quite right. Exactly. Should always be that way, Kev. I've got a little one just to check. It's not a football-related one. It's just one of those fucking irritating kind of viral phrases that turn up on social media. This is the one. I was today years old when I discovered that Americans call jam jelly. I was today years old when... That was the fuck off. I have just discovered. I've just learned. Not I was today years old. Now, let's get back to footy. Proper matters here. Sunderland at the weekend, De Zerbi's first match. Well, this is the impossible question to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway, Julie. What do you foresee?
I'm so excited. I really am. I just feel so optimistic about it. I think we're going to win. We're going to win 2-0. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, well, that's that. Them's fighting words. Kev, possibility that Kudus will be back, although I'm still not hearing anything about it from Gary of Harlow. Maybe even Bentancur, who knows?
Yeah, we're going to win. It's because at some point, statistically, my absurd optimism has to pay off, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it's going to be a comfortable win.
I like it. Or you can always rely on Kev to predict a win, even when the whole world knows he's off his head. Lee?
Again, I'm going to echo Julia. I think we're going to win. And it's going to be start of a nice run of wins.
7 matches, winning, 21 points. Yeah. Well, I wish I shared this optimism, but I'm still mired in, Frankism and Tudorism, and until I see something that encourages me, I just can't get out of it. Look, I'm going to go optimistically for a 1-1 draw. There you go. That's all from us today. My thanks, as ever, to Julie Welch and to Kevin Aker and to Lee Brown, who stepped in quite late on, and so grateful for him and giving us the benefit of his wisdom. You can follow us on Twitter at NiceOneCyrilPod. Have a look at our website, www.niceonecyrilpodcast.co.uk, and all the episodes are on there, plus lots of other gubbins. There's even a picture of Julie there, and Kev, and Lee, and God help you all, me. And then we have, what else do we have? Oh, why not give us a follow on the various podcast platforms and subscribe, and you'll never miss an episode. Thank you very much for joining us. We're back on Monday. Have a great week. Come on, you Spurs.
Nice one, Cyril.